People trickling through now. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm going to try and start promptly at 12. I'll give a few more minutes. Hi, everyone joining. We're going to just wait a couple of minutes just for a few more people to join, and then we'll try and kick off. We're at 12 o'clock now. Just again, a reminder for all the attendees that this is being recorded and will be shared after. So hopefully you don't need to do too much note taking, and we'll be able to kind of share some of the key points for any kind of questions you have afterwards as well. Oh, we have a hand raised. I don't know if that's a hello or if you have a question, but feel free to say anything. Perfect. Thank you, Esme. And of course, yeah, really want to encourage quite an interactive session. So if anyone has any questions at all or want to just, yeah, talk amongst themselves, you're very welcome to write on the chat. Looking at the time now, I think possibly I just start some introduction so we don't run out. So just to introduce myself, everyone, my name is not MyTutor, sorry. My name is Tamara, and I'm currently a senior marketing executive in the Tutors team. So the Tutors marketing team, so mainly focusing on all things to do with content and community as well for our tutors. And with that, I'll pass you on to Esme.
Hi, my name is Esme. I'm a marketing communications lead at MyTutor, so responsible for all of the messages that you see across emails, texts, what you see on the website, and also involved in the recruitment of tutors for MyTutor. And yeah, over to Enzo.
Hi, everybody. My name is Enzo. I'm one of the co-founders of Earnr, and we're an app to manage your tax and finances if you're self-employed, which includes many of the tutors here that are at MyTutor.
Perfect. Thank you, Enzo. And just to get warmed up, we have a little icebreaker. So we've got a couple of questions that we want to put out. Hopefully you guys have access to this poll that's just been released. So first of all, I want to know, how confident do you currently feel about dealing with tax in general? And also, have you submitted a tax return before as a tutor? And just so we can get a sense of the kind of experience level here. So if you don't mind just kind of filling that out while we're waiting. Oh no, we have lots of not confident people. Well, hopefully that changes by the end of this. Great. So a lot of people, this is kind of your first time dealing with this area. So hopefully this is really informative. Great. So it looks like most people have answered. So not confident, and this is a new experience for you. So totally appreciate dealing with tax, and self-employed is like quite a different like thing for most jobs. So we want to make it as quite a straightforward process in general. So we're really hoping that we can kind of break the stigma around things around tax and finance being quite complicated, and hopefully you guys feel a bit more confident by the end of this. So thank you very much, everyone that's answered. And perfect, some questions coming through already. So I'll just end the poll now. So with that then, you can see the results, everyone, as well, of just kind of what was answered there. So yeah, it looks like definitely a kind of new area for most tutors. So hopefully this will kind of shed some light on how it goes. With that then, I'm just going to pass over to Enzo to share his presentation. And again, feel free to keep questions coming through throughout. And thank you, Enzo.
All right, is everybody able to see this? Great. Well, again, thank you very much for attending this session, which is all about tax as a tutor when you're working for MyTutor. I'm going to try and cover as many of your questions that you've submitted before this webinar, and I've kind of summarized some of them here. So what we're going to be going through is, how does tax work for a tutor when you're working for MyTutor? Which is probably quite new for a lot of people, as most people don't have to deal with tax. Do I need to pay tax as a tutor? How do I pay tax as a tutor? And also a very important question is, what can you expense? Then at the end of the presentation, I'm going to go through some of the questions, some more specific questions that you've asked before. And then also we're going to go through any questions that you've raised since me starting this presentation. So again, just a reminder to put all your questions in the chat. My aim is for you to feel as confident as possible following this webinar. I do want to highlight as well, as if your questions are very, very personalized, I may not be able to answer them in this webinar, but you're also always able to contact me afterwards, and I'll try my best to help as much as possible. And also a small disclaimer as well, that all the content that I'll be covering in this presentation is general guidance. It is not tax advice. If you want to get tax advice, the best thing that I can recommend is contact a certified accountant that can help you with this. So to start off, how does tax work for a MyTutor tutor? So you've probably seen this a lot already as you've started your tutoring journey with MyTutor, is that you are sometimes classified or being told that you're a self-employed contractor or a worker. These are legal terms that signify that you're slightly different than a normal employee. When it comes to your tax or dealing with HMRC, which is the local tax authority here in the UK, you are always classified as a self-employed contractor. So if you hear terms like sole trader, self-employed, freelancer, those are all slightly different terms to say that you're a self-employed contractor. There's something to really keep in mind. And as a self-employed contractor, you are personally responsible for making sure that you pay the right amount of tax. Something that I wanted to introduce you as well as early as possible is that this idea of tax year, which is slightly different than a normal calendar year. So a tax year in the UK actually runs from the 6th of April to the 5th of April. And there's many strange reasons why this is. It's mainly historic, but it hasn't really changed in a very long time. So for an example, when you're preparing, let's say, your tax return for the 22-23 tax year, this actually runs from April 6th, 2022 to April 5th, 2023. As a self-employed contractor, there are 3 common types of tax that you have to be mindful of. First one is income tax. I think most people have heard about this already. The second one is national insurance. This is the money that you pay that gets used to pay for NHS, as well as paying for any state pension that you're going to get later in life. And the last one is value added tax, or VAT. This is also often known as sales tax, so percentage of tax that you pay on any purchase that you make, or any services that you provide. Now, when you're a MyTutor tutor, you only really have to worry about income tax and national insurance, as you're below the threshold most often than not to have to register as VAT. So everything VAT related is covered by MyTutor, which is one of the great things of being a tutor on MyTutor. Makes life a little bit easier. So first of all, do you need to pay taxes as a tutor? Technically, yes. So you pay tax on your profit for the year whenever you are self-employed. But to find your profits, you basically take all the revenue that you earn. So this is all the pay slips if you work on the worker side, or all the invoices when you work on the parent side, and then subtract your expenses. And that is your total profit for the year. Now in the UK, you have something called the personal allowance, which means that you can earn up to a certain amount without having to pay tax on that amount. This number changes slightly year to year, but in the current tax year, so the one that started on the 6th of April 2023 and runs all the way till the 5th of April 2024, you can earn up to £12,570 before having to pay income tax. I do want to kind of highlight that this is a term used for income tax specifically. So a lot of people get confused saying, I don't need to pay tax if I earn up until the personal allowance, right? It's your national insurance is calculated slightly differently. Now this number, again, this cutoff point has been changing. I'll dive a bit deeper into it later in this presentation, but there used to be times where you could be paying national insurance without actually earning more than £12,570.
Sorry, Enzo, can I just jump in? We've had a question come in. It says, is personal allowance for self-employed as well? Just to confirm.
Yeah, so personal allowance, it covers all your income. So it's not just used if you're self-employed or if you're just employed, it's across all your income. So I'm going to go through an example later in the presentation that hopefully makes that a little bit clearer. Because some of the major misconceptions that some people have is that, well, I have a personal allowance for employment, which is £12,570, and then I have a second personal allowance for my self-employed work. That's unfortunately not how it works. So how does income tax work in the UK? So the income tax system is a progressive tax system. So what that really means is that as you earn more money, you start earning more tax. And it kind of works in bands. So in the UK, or in England and Wales and Northern Ireland, there are 3 tax bands: the basic rate, the higher rate, and the additional rate. When you start earning above £12,570, you start paying income tax. So every pound you earn above £12,570, you have to pay 20p to HMRC. Now, if you then are lucky enough to start earning more than £50,000, for every additional pound you start earning, you have to pay 40p to HMRC. And if you're, again, lucky enough to even earn more than that, and you're in the additional rate, for every additional pound that you earn above £125,140, you start having to pay 45p for each additional pound that you earn. So it's a progressive tax system. Again, how this is calculated is across all your income. So if you're employed as well as self-employed, then you need to look at the total income you have to calculate your income tax. Now in the UK, there's also something called the tax-free allowance. This is specifically for people that earn self-employed income that aren't really earning enough to have to bother with having to do a tax return. So if you earn less than £1,000 from self-employed income by itself, then you are covered by the tax-free allowance. And there's 2 benefits of that. So first one, as I mentioned, you don't necessarily have to submit a tax return. The second one is that you don't have to pay tax on that first £1,000 if you choose to use that allowance. Again, I'll go into a little bit more detail of that later when I talk about expenses to make that slightly clear. I just want to very briefly touch on Scotland as well. Scotland has a slightly different system. So again, it is still a progressive income tax system. However, they have more bands. So in Scotland, you also have the starter rate, and the intermediate rates, and therefore slightly different cutoff points for that as well. So just wanted to highlight that sometimes people try to do these calculations themselves on a calculator online, and then it somehow doesn't align with their actual tax bill. Often that's because maybe you're based in Scotland and have to pay the Scottish tax. Now that's income tax. The second bit is national insurance. And unfortunately, national insurance, they don't make it easy for you to really understand how the system works. When you're employed, you pay national insurance, and that's a specific percentage of everything you earn over a threshold. But when you're self-employed, you have to start paying class 2 and potentially class 4 national insurance. Class 2 is calculated as the number of weeks that you've been working as a self-employed individual, so as a tutor. And class 4 is calculated very similar to income tax as a percentage of how much you've earned over a specific threshold. Again, these thresholds, especially in the last 3 years, have changed a lot. So I'm not going to go into too much detail of that because you might get different answers depending on what tax return you're preparing, but that's how they're calculated. Now you can also choose to voluntarily pay for national insurance, and this is technically called class 3, but you may also see it as voluntary class 2 national insurance. So you may want to choose to do this as your national insurance basically pays for your state pension or your maternity leave or your sick leaves. If you haven't paid enough national insurance over the course of your working life, when you retire, you may not be eligible for the full state pension. So some people choose to actually voluntarily pay this national insurance for a certain amount of years when they maybe haven't earned enough money so that they're still eligible for the full state pension. So how do I pay tax as a tutor, which is probably something a lot of you are thinking about. And there's 3 main steps. Oh, sorry, Tamara, you have a question.
Sorry, thanks. And so just if you can go back to the other slide, because we just had quite a relevant question come through there. So someone just asked, do you pay national insurance if you are a student?
You pay national insurance when you earn self-employed earnings over a specific amount.
Okay, hope that helps answer. Thanks, Enzo.
So how do you pay tax as a tutor? There's 3 main steps that you need to take. So first of all is you need to register for a UTR. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in a second for that, because you can't submit a tax return without a UTR, which stands for a unique tax reference number. Second is actually submitting the self-assessment tax return to HMRC. You need to do this by the 31st of January if you're doing it online, which again is the majority of tax returns that get submitted. Or if you're a little bit more old school and you want to complete the form by post, you have until the 31st of October to submit it. And again, just to highlight, because I know these tax years are not very intuitive, on the 31st of January 2024, you need to submit a tax return for the income you've earned between April 6th, 2022 and April 5th, 2023. Now, if you choose to submit it by post, then that deadline is the 31st of October, 2023. After you submit your tax return, you can pay whatever outstanding tax bill you have to HMRC. The deadline for that is the same date as the submission, so it's the 31st of January. We always advise you to do your tax return before the deadline because it takes HMRC sometimes a couple of days to actually calculate your final tax bill. So if you don't really know your final tax bill yet, it's quite difficult to then have to pay that on the same day that you submit it. So it's always a good thing to submit your tax return before the deadline so that you can be confident that you're paying the right amount by the 31st of January. So giving you a bit more detail, what is involved in the different steps. So first of all, is registering for UTR. UTR looks something like this. It's just a 10-digit number that you have that is personal to yourself. It's very similar to a national insurance number, but you don't automatically get a UTR number. You only get a UTR number if you have to submit a self-assessment tax return. So in the UK, around 12 million people submit the tax return each year, compared to a working population of around 35 million. So 1 in 3, basically. Now, you don't need to have a UTR number until you've earned over £1,000 within a specific tax year. That's that tax-free allowance that I was talking about earlier. And when I say £1,000 within a specific tax year, that's £1,000 between April 6th to April 5th. If you go over that amount within a specific tax year, that's when you have to tell HMRC that you are earning self-employed income. I do want to highlight that you can voluntarily register for UTR if you want to. There's nothing wrong with it. You can always tell HMRC that you haven't earned more than £1,000 within a tax year after you've registered for a UTR number. You just have to give them a call to let them know. Now, second step is submitting your self-assessment. Your self-assessment basically includes all the income that you've earned within a tax year. So it may include your employment income, your self-employment income, but also if you've received any dividends, capital gains, foreign income, anything that you think HMRC might want to know about. And you can submit it in 4 different ways. So either directly through HMRC on their online portal, also often called your personal tax account, an app like Earnr, an accountant, or you can do it through the post. And like I said, finally, you need to pay your tax bill, to pay your outstanding balance by January 31st. Now, there's 2 ways you can pay this. So if you're employed, you can also choose to pay through your tax code. So that's a slightly easier way that you can actually pay throughout the year rather than once off. If you want to pay through your tax code, you have to submit it a couple of months before January 31st to be able to do that. Or you can pay your bill directly to HMRC. And again, that can be very easily done through their portal.
Hey, Enzo, sorry, another question that I thought was relevant to the last slide. Do you need a national insurance number to register for UTR?
Yes, you do. So I kind of skipped over that a little bit, but when you register for UTR, they'll ask you about your address, your national insurance number, your name, and a little bit more about what kind of self-employed income you do. So as a tutor, you basically tell them you're a tutor. So I wanted to go through a little bit of an example of how you might have to calculate your tax as a tutor. So in this example, we have Jude. She lives in London. So the England tax bands are the ones that she should be thinking about. She's earned £20,000 working for a local coffee shop, and has also earned £2,000 from tutoring through MyTutor. So we're going to go through an example of how she could calculate how much tax she needs to pay. So again, the 2 taxes that she needs to really worry about is income tax and national insurance. So first we calculate how much is her total taxable income. So she's earned £20,000 through being a barista and £2,000 through MyTutor, which means that she's earned £22,000 in the year. Now we know that the first £12,570, which was her personal allowance, is taxed at 0%. So for that, she doesn't have to pay anything. Now anything on top of that, she pays 20% tax. So she's earned £9,430 that she needs to pay 20% tax at, which is £1,886. Now she's earned less than £12,570, so she doesn't have to pay any Class 2 national insurance. And she's earned less than £12,572, so she doesn't have to pay any Class 4 national insurance. She does have to pay some Class 1 national insurance potentially, but I haven't covered it in this example, but that is covered by your employer. Now, Jude has already paid £1,486 through PAYE. So that is how you pay income tax as an employee. So she only has to pay an additional £400 on her tax bill by January 31st. So £400 is the difference between 1,886 that we calculated and the 1,486 that she's already paid. So that's what she'll have to pay by the 31st of January. Now, lastly, I very quickly want to go through expenses. Again, I do want to highlight that when we talk to a lot of tutors, we don't see that they have many expenses. So they tend to prefer using something to use the trading allowance. But in general, you can expense anything which is a cost that you've incurred, which is wholly and exclusively for the purposes of running your tutoring business. That's the official definition. Unfortunately, HMRC doesn't give a big breakdown of how that exactly applies if you're a tutor, but I've given a couple of examples here. So if you're using your phone for tutoring or your internet, then you can expense a certain portion of that in your tax self-assessment. If you use any software outside of MyTutor or any books that you had to buy for your tutoring business, you can expense that. Let's say you use an accountant or any software to manage your accounting, you can expense that. And if you work from home, you can expense a portion of that in your self-assessment tax return. I'll go a little bit more detail in a bit on the different ways that you can do that, because there's an easy way and a slightly more complicated way. Now, you can also use the £1,000 tax-free training allowance instead of going through your expenses. This is often a lot easier because you don't have to keep any receipts or any paperwork or any justification in all the expenses you've incurred. So we see with a lot of tutors that they prefer to use a training allowance. It just means that HMRC assumes you've incurred £1,000 of expenses without asking any additional questions. Great. Now I have written a couple of questions already that were submitted before on the slide that I'm going to go through. And obviously, if you have any more questions, keep on adding them in the webinar, and we'll go through those later as well. So first question is, how should you fill out the self-assessment form if you have another job where you're on PAYE? So again, your self-assessment tax return needs to include everything you've earned in a specific tax year. So if you're on PAYE, that also needs to be included, even though you've already paid tax on it in the example as well that we went through with Jude. Now, the easiest way to do that is you often get a P60 form. It's like an orange looking form from HMRC or from your employer a couple of months after the tax year, and that will have all the information you need from your employment to put into your self-assessment tax return. If you've actually left your job before the end of the tax year, you should be getting a form called a P45 form. Unfortunately, they don't have a specific color for those. It's just black and white. But you should get those within a month of you leaving your employment whenever you leave. Second question, can you classify your student house rent as an office space tax write-off? So HMRC allows you to expense any work from home expenses that you incur. And there's two ways of doing that. One is the simplified method, which is you can expense £26 a month if you work more than 100 hours a month. And you can expense slightly differently depending on how long you work in your home. So most people expense therefore £312 for 12 months throughout the year. Another way of doing it, and again, this is a simplified, you don't have to keep any receipts, you don't have to keep any proof of how much you pay in rent. It's the easier way of doing it. The other way of doing this is a slightly more complicated method, which is where you take a percentage of your rent that justifies how much you've been using your place of home as a place of work. So as an example, if you're renting a one-bedroom apartment, you need to first divide your total rent by the number of rooms in your house, because you most likely only use one room for your tutoring business when you're tutoring. And then you have to divide that by the number of time that you actually spend on tutoring within your house. So again, if you only work 1 day a week, then you have to divide that again by 7. And that is a way of justifying a certain percentage of your rent as cost and expense. Next question is, MyTutor gives payments twice a month to tutors. I received payments for the second half of March on April 6th. Does this count as income for the previous tax year that just passed, or is it part of next year's salary? So again, this really depends on what tax system you use. A lot of apps like ourselves use cash-based accounting. How that works, which you can use if you earn less than £85,000 within a specific tax year. If you use cash-based accounting, you count the date that the money has been paid into your account. So almost think about like you've received the cash-based accounting, you received the cash. That's the date that you need to think about when you received it, and when you need to declare it. So if you've received any income on April 6th, 2023, it's for the 23-24 tax year. Now, if you use the other method, which is accruals-based accounting, then you say that you've earned a specific income whenever you performed a service or when you've sent the invoice. So for that, you might say, therefore, that you have you use the date, which is probably before April 6th. Again, accruals-based accounting is slightly more complicated way of doing your self-assessment tax return. Cash-based accounting is what most of our customers use, so it's slightly easier. Next one is, do we need to invoice either parents or MyTutor for our services? Again, this is the great thing about MyTutor. They automatically already do this for you. So Tamara has actually shown me what it looks like. It looks quite easy to get to. So on your portal, you'll be able to see all your invoices that you can download for your own bookkeeping, as well as any pay slips if you're a worker. Next thing is, if I do tutoring as a part-time job and it pushes me over the minimum salary for student loans, what do I do? So again, as many of you know, you don't have to pay back your student loans immediately. It only gets taken off of your salary once you hit a specific threshold. The threshold, again, is different depending on what plan you're on. If your total income, so your part-time job pushes you over the minimum salary, then you have to start paying back your student loan. If the part-time job in particular, I'll assume this is MyTutor, that will form part of your tax bill at the end of the year. So when you do your self-assessment tax return, it'll include income tax, national insurance, but also your student loan repayments. All right. I've been talking a lot. I think there have been some other questions as well. So let me know.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Enzo. I'm sure a lot of people can agree that was very informative, and it's just really good to see a level of detail you went to there. So we did have some more pre-asked questions that we just wanted to flag. So people that submitted questions beforehand, and just thought we'd kind of raise a couple of them right now. So one of the questions was actually, and I'm trying to make sure it's something that you haven't answered, just really back to basics regarding tax codes. So what's the tax code? And then when do I need to start paying tax, which you may have covered? Oh, sorry, Enzo, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Good question. So a tax code is something that your employer uses to get an understanding of how much tax they need to withhold from your salary. The most common one is 1257L, which basically means that you have a £12,570 personal allowance. So you can kind of see from the numbers how much of your personal allowance you have available. Again, I've talked about personal allowance a lot as just being a static number. The number can change depending on your personal environment or personal kind of financial situation. So it can change depending on the tax year, but that's the most common one. The letter also signifies something to HMRC as well. So sometimes when you start work, you get put on a emergency tax code where you actually get overtaxed initially, and then you get put, and then when that gets updated, your tax code then changes and the amount of tax you pay changes. So again, like let's say, and the only thing that I can really think is that it could be applicable to you if you choose to pay your tutoring tax bill through your tax code, then your tax code will be updated and your employer will be told that your tax code has been updated. Don't worry, they will not be told that you have any additional income stream. It's just that they then know how much tax they need to withhold. And I guess hopefully that also answers the when do I need to start paying tax already.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Enzo. Another question that was quite popular beforehand and also even during the session was just around the kind of differences with the numbers, like the figure 1,000 has come up and the figure 12,570. So if possible, just to kind of clarify, the kind of distinguish both figures, and what is it like the £1,000 is related to, and what is it the 12,570 is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the easiest way to think about it, especially when it comes to the £1,000, is when you use the tax-free allowance, HMRC basically assumes that you've had £1,000 in expenses. So if you've earned £800 from MyTutor over a specific tax year, and you use a tax-free allowance, then HMRC will assume you've made no profit off of your tutoring business. And if you've made no profit, that means there's nothing to tax. Now, again, unfortunately, like the tax-free allowance, the term is exactly the same for also the cutoff point when you have to start declaring your income to HMRC. So that's often where we see a lot of confusion as well. If you earn less than £1,000 in income, so again, you've earned £800 directly from MyTutor, and that's the only platform you use, then you don't have to declare that to HMRC, and you don't need to get a UTR number, and you don't have to kind of start this process of having to declare all that income. Now, there may be other reasons why you might need to submit a tax return. So there is a little bit of a caveat. Just because you've earned less than £1,000 doesn't mean that you never have to do a tax return. But that is often what we see the most applicable when it comes to tutors. Now, the £12,570 is your personal allowance. That is what the government allows you to earn without having to pay income tax. And that is over your total income. This tax-free allowance is only for your self-employed income. So if you don't earn any self-employed income, then that £1,000 doesn't do that.
Perfect, well answered, Enzo, thank you. And just to kind of segue from there, just something you brought up was around other jobs. So one of the questions was, what are the rules for full-time employed people with a self-employed freelance position on the side? So I think you kind of covered that within your presentation, but just again to kind of clarify that for people that maybe are tutoring with MyTutor as well as working full-time elsewhere.
Yes, so in terms of rules, in terms of like, are you allowed from HMRC? Well, HMRC doesn't mind how you earn your income as long as you declare it and it is legal. And as I mentioned, like how they look at your income is your total income. So they look at, especially for income tax, they just add those two things together and then they start calculating how much income tax you need to pay. For national insurance, that's slightly different because you're again paying different types of national insurance. So that's when they care. In terms of rules, like it's always a good idea to at least let your employer know, but from my understanding with the tutors that we've worked with, we haven't heard many problems.
Great, thank you. And so hopefully that clarifies some things for everyone. So quite a lot of great questions coming through in the chat, a bit more specific, but we're going to try and tackle this however you can. And then anything that also isn't answered here, we can try and do a bit of a write-up, or we'll have a feedback survey coming out at the end as well. So if your question doesn't get answered, feel free to resubmit it and we'll try and get like a detailed answer for you. But there was a question around, I'm just looking at the ones to see if there's a specific upvoted one. So yes, this was around the £1,000, the trading allowance. So just kind of what you were just briefly talking about. So this is from James, and he was wondering, on the MyTutor income, it was £400, which is 20% of £2,000, as opposed to £200, as this is 20% of the self-employed income over £1,000. Having read that, I'll put it here too so you can see it, but I'm not sure that would be more your remit, or possibly more actually a MyTutor one.
I mean, I do want to highlight in the example that I went through with Jude, I actually didn't include the tax-free allowance. So I've assumed that she hasn't used it. So maybe that's, apologies for that. That's maybe led to a little bit of confusion there, because you're right. Jude was allowed to use her tax-free allowance on that £2,000 that she's earned. So technically, if she set that to HMRC, then she would only need to pay 20% on £1,000, so therefore £200 rather than £400. So that is well spotted. It sounds like you've taken a lot already from my presentation. It's good to hear.
Great observation, James. And thank you, Enzo, for answering that. And another question, it's anonymous. Does bursary or a PhD studentship count towards that as well? Count towards the money that you declare?
Again, yeah, this is a very specific question, but in general, you need to declare any income that you've earned to HMRC. So there are slightly different sections of the tax return on the HMRC website, or if you do a paper form that you need to fill in if you get any grants or bursaries as part of your PhD.
Perfect. Another anonymous question just around national insurance. How can we get a national insurance number?
A national insurance is managed by the Department of Work and Pensions, DWP. So you would need to contact them directly to get a national insurance number. But again, national insurance number isn't just a tax thing. It is also used by many other parts of government. So unfortunately, I can't ask too many questions when it comes to national insurance because it is not just used for tax.
Great, thank you, Enzo. And then we have another one. Yes, so how do you voluntarily pay national insurance if you aren't earning over £12,570? Or is that something that needs to be done?
It's something that you put on your self-assessment tax return. So again, if you use an app like Earnr, it's a tick of the box. If you use online, I believe it is also like somewhere in one of the forms there that they'll ask, do you want to voluntarily pay class 2 national insurance?
Perfect, thank you. Another question, just having a look at the ones kind of coming through. So this is from Amira. What does the question that, sorry, let me just double check that. I'll try to make sure I'm wording that properly. So it seems like she's asking, what does the question they received, so we received notification from the student loans company that repayment, in fact, sorry, I feel like I'm not fully understanding this. Let me repost this. So if it was, I think it's to do with payment before the 6th of April, 2023. Amira, you might want to clarify this because I don't want to get your question wrong, sorry. But just like a question around before the, so how, maybe how you get notified before the 6th, or is there something like, will you know when you have to pay, or do you get notified or anything? Again, Amira, feel free to clarify that, but I think that's perhaps what you're asking.
Yeah, so when it comes to self-employed income, HMRC doesn't always know that you could be earning this self-employed income unless you tell them. So therefore, they make it your responsibility to inform them that you've earned this self-employed income. Overall, a lot more online places like Airbnb and Uber are now reporting how much you earn on that platform directly to HMRC. That is something that's going to keep on happening in the next 10 years. So if you earn it above £1,000, it is best to register with HMRC to get a UTR number as soon as possible.
Thank you, Enzo, and sorry, feel free to write that again, Amira, in case I got that wrong, but I hope I've understood what you meant there. So another question that has come up quite a lot is around the £1,000 again. So questions around, is it £1,000, is that a one-off that you get, or is that each year, each tax year? And I think there was also another one. Yeah, is it around £1,000 per year? So that's the question.
Yeah, the personal allowance is every year, not a one-off.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, £1,000 every year. Another question, is council tax affected by self-employed status? That's from Ashley.
Unfortunately, I'm not an expert when it comes to council tax, but happy to potentially cover that question if you just contact us directly, and the team at Earnr will be able to help with that.
Perfect, thank you. Just double checking now, a few things have been answered. Yeah, there's another one around council tax as well, so I think that's one that might need to be specifically checked by someone else. Another question, Ramira, how do I know my student loan repayment type? I'm not sure that's specifically around tax, Enzo, or is it something that you can still find?
You can look on the government website, and there it explains what defines what your type is. From my understanding, is often based on when you started your studies.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I believe there's different types of plans, and you usually see the one that's most relevant to you when you're kind of applying for this at the first place too. So hopefully that helps too. Another question, just double checking. So a question about Earnr actually, is it possible to access Earnr through a browser? This is an anonymous question, but the person doesn't seem to be able to download it from the Google store.
Yeah, well, So at the moment, let me actually go back to the presentation. I'm going to give you a little bit more information about Earnr. So thank you for that question. So what is Earnr? Earnr is a simple way for the self-employed to manage your tax and finance. We've tried to make a really simple app that helps self-employed individuals, which includes tutors, manage the tax and financial admin. You can use the app for free to do your bookkeeping. So again, keep track of your payments, how much you've earned, understand whether you're over the threshold of when you have to start doing a tax return. We have some short videos in the app as well that kind of give you some explanations about some of the topics I've also covered today. And then also you can submit your tax return to HMRC in the app. We are live on iOS and on some Android devices. So if the Google Play Store isn't working, I'll let the team know and get a better understanding of why it's not. Unfortunately, like our iOS product is slightly more developed than our Android one. So we don't have a web page just yet for the app and submitting your tax return.
Perfect, thank you. I definitely recommend having a little look on this app. It looks very, very informative, and it seems like it has some really good feedback from people that have used it. So thanks, Enzo. We'll make sure to share the link to that. We also had a question actually just around filling out the form. Let me just find it again, sorry. Sorry, the suspense, everything's disappeared on my side, but here we go. Oh yeah, perfect, sorry. So what happens if we make a mistake anywhere when we're filling out the self-assessment? Will the HMRC get back to us to clarify, or would like the application be stopped?
Yeah, so if you submit your tax return to HMRC, they will do their review of it. You can resubmit your tax return after you submitted your first one. So if you found that something was entered incorrectly, then it is best to resubmit your tax return as soon as possible to HMRC. What can happen is that your tax return gets audited, where you then have to share a lot more information with HMRC about everything you've included in your tax return. And that's often quite a painful process.
Thank you. And so hopefully that made sense. And we have a question from Megan. So if you have other jobs that you've had tax taken away, but you overall haven't earned more than £12,570, how does that work? So that's the first half of the question. And then the second half is, do you just put all your earnings in the form and then the HMRC works out if you should get a tax return? So I'll share that just to make sure.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So if you have a UTR number and are submitting a tax return, then you, exactly like you said, you enter all that information in your tax return, how much tax you've paid. If you've gone and if HMRC agrees that you've paid too much tax, you will be able to get a refund on your tax bill. And they can pay that out directly to your bank account, or they can send you a check to the post, whichever one you prefer. Do keep in mind that like HMRC does take a bit of time to send in refunds. So they're very quick to ask you for money, but they're sometimes a little bit slower when it comes to actually processing refunds. A lot of the time, this is to do some additional security checks to make sure that they're sending the money to the right person. If you don't have a UTR number, you haven't had to submit a tax return yet, and you're just employed, then you can also ask for a refund directly to your personal tax account. So again, this is the online portal at HMRC where you can manage your taxes. You can ask for a refund without having to submit a full self-assessment tax return there if you're just employed.
Great, thank you, Enzo. So we've got a couple more minutes left. We're just trying to see, everyone, you are welcome to upvote questions if there's anything that hasn't been answered that you do want to get the answer to. Otherwise, I'll also ask, yes, so a question from Hannah. Where can you find the threshold for national insurance? I think in terms of what you pay.
Yeah, I would recommend going directly to the government website because that has the most up-to-date information when it comes to all the different tax bands as well as national insurance bands.
Perfect, thank you. Straightforward answer there. So yeah, I'm just trying to make sure there's quite a few questions that were similar to things that have been answered. So just trying to make sure to kind of ask anything that's a bit different.
I think maybe what's helpful, I think there was one question that I saw, which is around if you're a worker and how do you calculate your total pay? So because you get holiday pay as well, when you submit your self-assessment tax return, you need to make sure you include all your income. So that includes your holiday pay if you are classed as a worker on the MyTutor platform.
Great, thanks. And so, yeah, the question I believe is here from Tekla. So, yes, what does holiday pay mean, and how do we tell the amount that was removed for tax? So you can tell HMRC that your income was taxed. So, yeah, I believe it does show on your invoice exactly how much is holiday pay. So you can see the different payments there, and then you should be able to work out exactly what you need to give there. So, yeah, thanks for calling that one out there. Also, just checking from a question that was asked beforehand as well. Yes, something you covered in your presentation, but just to clarify again, when is the deadline for returning your self-assessment each tax year?
Yeah, it's the 31st of January. So the tax return that is due on the 31st of January 2024, so the one that is upcoming, includes all the income you've earned between the 6th of April 2022 and the 5th of April 2023. So you get quite a lot of time to submit your tax return. Interesting fact is that over 50% of people submit a tax return in January. So a lot of people procrastinate. But like I said, there are definite benefits to submitting it early, especially if you want to pay through your tax code.
Great, thank you. And so I would be one of those people procrastinating too as well, but the last minute in January, getting it done. So Enzo actually had a question just specifically around Earnr that we thought would be useful for the people kind of watching. What are like the main things on the Earnr app that you can get like help on? Like it'd be really good to just know a bit more about the app and just exactly what it can be used for and how we can support in this kind of situation as well.
Yeah, of course. So with the Earnr app, how it works is you can connect your bank account directly to the app, and then we automatically see your different income. So if you see your MyTutor payments every week, you get reminded to make sure to add this to your bookkeeping. You can add any receipts that you have when it comes to expenses or any invoices to each individual transaction. We also have an Insights tab, which kind of allows you to understand how much you've earned. And again, once you earn over specific thresholds, we kind of give you a nudge to let you know that you might have to do a tax return or you might have to register. You can also register for a UTR number directly in the app. What we found is most useful is that some people really struggle with submitting their UTR number directly with HMRC. We actually get a little bit more information on why you might be struggling. So we'll be able to help you more directly with that. So sometimes people have moved address and then have not updated that with HMRC. You don't often get that feedback directly from HMRC when you register for your UTR number. And then lastly, as I mentioned, you can submit your tax return, but there's also a handy tax estimate. So we help you estimate what your tax bill is throughout the year, which is helpful. So hopefully you don't get any surprises. And then finally, we have a very, very friendly team that you can always ask questions to directly in the app. We always try to make sure that we get back to any complicated questions within 24 to 48 hours. So you don't have to be worried for too long.
Perfect, thanks. And so yeah, definitely looks like the app just helps make the overall process a lot more smoother, which is something that I know kind of filling out these like tax returns can be quite daunting. So definitely would recommend having a look. And also just wanted to share, we've worked with Earnr previously on a lovely blog that kind of covers a lot of these questions as well. So hopefully you can see that on the chat, so Introducing to Tax. So if you're someone that's quite new to this Introduction to Tax blog is probably something that will have a lot of the key questions that were asked here. So definitely recommend you have a look at that. And there's also an article that we do have on our page regarding tax, again, reiterating some of these questions, since people at Earnr know a lot more than people at MyTutor too surrounding some of these questions. So definitely would recommend these being your first points of call. And also, and so another question that's come up has been around the self-assessment. So let's put that for you. Would you recommend doing a self-assessment for employment and self-employment via an accountant or an app, or do you think we can do it ourselves? So kind of a mix of kind of things you've answered, but to get your take on that one.
I would say it really depends how complicated your personal financial situation is. An accountant is obviously an expert, but they're also not cheap. I would say an app is kind of somewhere in between, like it gives you more guidance than having to do everything yourself, but you're still kind of doing a lot of the steps yourself. And then doing it yourselves. Compared to other countries, I have to say that the UK is slightly easier. However, it is still quite daunting because we saw that most people here have not done their first self-assessment tax return yet, but you get asked a lot of questions. Something that we hear from a lot of customers before they've switched to Earnr is, I've just clicked a bunch of buttons and I hope that it's okay. So you get a little bit more confidence if you go through a route like an app or going to an accountant.
Great, thank you. Definitely probably want to stick to the professionals on and just make sure that you get the right support and the right advice. So sounds brilliant. And a couple more minutes left, so we'll just kind of round it off on a few questions. Got a couple questions left. So just to cover this one, if I've made only £50 as tax here from self-employment, do I need to submit a self-assessment? And I think we covered that.
Yeah, so if this is your only income, it's likely that you don't have to submit a self-assessment. Again, I don't know whether there may be other reasons why you have to submit a self-assessment, because there are many others that aren't directly linked to how much money you earn from self-employed income. The best thing that I can recommend is, if you're not 100% sure, is to just contact HMRC directly. It takes a little bit of time to get through, so you might have to wait like 15 to 30 minutes, but then the team there are super helpful in giving you guidance on whether you have to submit a tax return. It's just very difficult for me to say this on a call because it really depends on your personal situation. And HMRC luckily knows a lot more about your personal situation when you call them. But you can also go to an accountant or something like Earnr that can give you a little bit more guidance in that situation.
Great, thank you, Enzo. And just to also end this question, there is one from an international student. So I know things do differ kind of depending on that as well. But just wanted to call it out in case you can just kind of add some guidance on this as well. So I'm an international student, so EU pre-settled status, and I do not have a UK national insurance number. So I'm unsure how to go about taxes. If you have any kind of support there or kind of recommendations on what to do.
Unfortunately, like, I won't be able to help with this specific question. My recommendation would be, again, contact HMRC. They're very helpful on the phone. It'll just take a little bit of time to get through. Or I would say potentially ask your university on any guidance that they have. Because from working with lots of tutors that are international students, there's a lot of guidance that you can get directly from the university for that. So that would be my recommendation.
Perfect, really great. And so I think it's good calling out. A lot of people may not realize that the university actually does have a lot of support on hand with kind of questions around that. So definitely recommend that being somewhere you go to first as well. And yeah, hopefully you should get the answers you need. But with that, a couple minutes left, but just want to say thank you again, everyone who's kind of taken time out to join. Understand that kind of tax and topic around it can be quite, as I mentioned, daunting, but hopefully from this webinar, you found a lot of questions answered and you feel a bit more confident as well in how you kind of go about it. I want to say a huge thank you to you too, Enzo. Been really great getting your take on things. And I know that you're very on hand to kind of support this, and highly again want to recommend anyone that's interested in getting more support to have a look at the Earnr app and just see the kind of cool things that's going on there. But yeah, with the end of this, we're going to send a feedback form as well, just kind of gauge how you found the webinar, and also just if you have any further questions that you don't feel were answered, to try and support you on that. And hopefully for this new tax year ahead, you feel a lot more confident going into it. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for joining, and hopefully you also get the recording being sent out soon. Thank you, Enzo, and thank you, Esme, as well.
Thank you.
Okay, take care everyone.
Bye.